All right, welcome to 40 Fit Food. My name is Oscar, and this person here is Mimi.
Hi, we're here every Tuesday to help give you fitness tips and advice and how you can hold a handstand for as long as possible. No, how you can continue doing something you enjoy, like kung fu, handstands, lion dancing, well into your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond.
That's pretty good, holding that handstand for that long. So this is part 2 of our Chinese New Year episodes. Last week we talked about lion tail. Remember, lion dancing involves 2 people, someone who's holding a head, that's usually Mimi, someone who's in the tail, that's usually me. We went over the tail last week, so this week we are going to talk about the lion head.
Yes, and the reason I was in a handstand is not just for fun. Honestly, for me, that was actually a good way to kind of make sure I kind of built up that strength in order to be able to hold the lion. A lot of times people really only feel sorry for the tail because they're bent over the whole time. But the lion head, there's a lot of intricacies, a lot of things that are happening, not just the coordination side, but on the strength side, you do have to keep your hands extended overhead with a weight. And for me, if I could hold my body weight, that was always a great test. But I also come from a little bit of a gymnastics and kung fu background. And so handstands may not be the first go-to on training in order to do the lion head.
We're now going to go backwards.
Rewind.
Insert the dissolve scene. Okay, just kidding. So instead of jumping right into a handstand, which is one of the ultimate tests of like balance and upper body strength, we've got to make sure that the midsection of your core is strong, and there's no better way to do that than with the dead bug exercise. Not correctly named because it's not you're moving. I think it should be called the mostly dead bug. The mostly dead bug. And so Mimi's on her back here, her knees are up, her feet are up, her arms are up, but the most important thing and the biggest part here is that your low back is pushing into the ground. I'm gonna come around the side here, but there should be no space, no light here on that low back. One of the things that we do in class is one of the things that we do in class is we put like a towel there and start pulling on it. But yeah, bad would be me being able to fit my whole hand behind her lower back, and good would be me I can't get in there because she's really driving that low back into the ground. If she's driving the low back into the ground, then we know that she's stabilizing right here.
And you may already feel this here, so follow along.
Yes, actually, this is exactly where I start people. Actually, I'm going to regress real quick. Yep. I start people here, and I say, I just want you to drive that low back into the ground and breathe. Take a big breath in and a forceful exhale out, and keep pushing. Like if there was a scale on your low back, I want those numbers jumping up, 100, 200, 300, just rising up, and that already is hard enough.
It's a workout for me.
Yeah, but that's the importance of keeping that position. Then we're going to have her bring the feet up, and we're just going to skip through moving into the dead bug. The benefit is that you're creating a lot of stability here in the midsection while the extremities move. So opposite limbs move. That's your exhale, inhale, or inhale, exhale. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but I prefer exhaling as you're reaching out. There's also a benefit to the same limbs moving, but either way doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're stressing this area while your extremities, while your limbs are moving. And that translates to pretty much any athletic endeavor, from walking to running to pressing to everything else, right? The next step from this, if you're thinking what our goal was of getting into a handstand, is just getting into this kind of hollowed out position, which you see a lot of divers or gymnasts kind of get into. And that alone is hard, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Follow along.
Yeah, it's not easy. And so from there,
handstands?
We go into handstands, which you don't have to do again. But that is kind of the progression of going from the floor all the way up into the handstand. And then that translates to when you're doing your lion dance, that you're able to keep stability here in the midsection and then move from the waist and move from that upper body, from the thoracic spine, while maintaining that. And it's not as robotic as that, right? But this is staying stable. The hips are moving. That upper body is moving a lot. And that's super important for the lion dance, because if you can't even do that, there's no way that then your brain is going to be able to process, oh, I've got to like flip the mouth open and blink the eyes and snap the head back and forth and come up and down, which there's a lot going on under the head, under the mask.
Yes, and so beyond that, or in addition to that rather, is something that you and I talk about a lot, because our beginner lion dancers often always want to, you know, project the head up and just like keep extending. And so we always talk about this packing it in, packing it in. And I think maybe you could kind of break that down for people and show kind of why we need to do that, but also kind of what that technique is. Because that's also why people collapse in a handstand,
right,
is because they're not packed in. And so that's, I think, a really cool thing to kind of go over.
Yeah, and so as far as packing it in, it does have to be clarified, right? Because packing your shoulder blades in, some people may think like it is pinch the shoulder blades together. That's not going to be a strong position to be in. But really what packing it in is, we're thinking of the big muscle of the back, your lats, being able to support the structure of the upper body. This will allow your shoulder blade, and just imagine my hand as Mimi's shoulder blade, it'll allow it to kind of glide up and down. So it's still a stable thing that kind of will glide up and down, and then allows the shoulder just to have a ton of range of motion to do what it needs to do. But if it doesn't start with a strong back, a mobile mid-back, where your thoracic spine is able to kind of move, the shoulder blade gliding the way it needs to be, and then the shoulder itself moving the way that it's meant to be, all of those things are going into account. And so instead of thinking of all those things individually, a great bang for your buck movement is the floor slide. We do the floor slide because we just don't have wall space at the temple, and we don't really have wall space here to do it either. But we assume that starting position we did before, making sure that the low back is pushed into the ground, right? Because this is creating stability. You think of your spine, your lumbar area, the area of your core, of your midsection, is stable. As you move up into that thoracic spine, that mid to upper back, that should be very mobile. So what this is going to show is stability here in the low back. She's going to make sure that low back stays on the ground. Inhale as the elbows come in, and then exhale as the hands come out. Into like, she can get her arms relatively straight, but usually we go into a Y because that's where most people feel comfortable. But what's happening here is, if we cue her to keep her low back on the ground and to sandpaper the forearms and the back of her hands, the back of her wrist into the floor, then what's happening is the thoracic spine, your mid-back, is creating a lot of mobility, which allows the shoulder blades to move the way they're meant to, and then gives you all that mobility of the shoulder. And so this is a great test for people. If they can't do that, they're going to struggle when you give them a lion head to move around.
Right. Awesome.
Up we go.
Up we go.
Oh, and then as far as packing goes, really, Mimi demonstrated that when she was in a push-up position, because when her, or sorry, in her handstand position, because when her hands were up, she wasn't in a handstand like this, right? She was kind of pushing the ground away and creating a lot of stability here. And so the packing isn't necessarily like, I need you to pack the shoulder deep into the socket. It's more just make sure this is strong and allow yourself to have the movement there.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
Cool.
If you've watched our Get Up episode, that was also a nice thing, because you always do the little packing test. So lots of different exercises and ways. But basically, you know, I think in addition to just being able to do a handstand or hold the lion and things like that, it's not always overhead, you know, to translate to over, you know, even when we do our punches, everything like that, all of these same principles overlap. And so that's why all of these things are kind of important to kind of know what your body is. And that dead bug exercise, we're talking about it in context of, okay, stabilizing for the lion head, but that is kind of one of the ultimate, everybody always wants to do crunches, and everybody always wants to do like the ultimate ab workout, and just, I've done 1,000 repetitions of this, but honestly, the dead bug and then plank. If you want a dead bug and you want a plank, you really don't need much more. If you want a stable one, we're holding those planks, right? Or ultimately handstands, if you really want to look cool. I think that one actually looks the coolest. But the dead bug, I think, is such an underrated, and, you know, people don't feel like they want to do that one. But if you do it properly, it is by far much more of a burn and much more of an actual, like, you'll feel that workout.
Right. If you think it's too easy, just come see me. And all I'll have you do is kind of get into that position, put a towel under your low back, and just try to pull it out from underneath you. That alone will do it, and then we can add more, not complexity to it, but more tactile feedback to it to make sure that you're doing it correctly, so that you don't even need that feedback, that you can do it on your own and really get the benefit from it.
Yeah. And just to reiterate what you've been saying, the reason we want to do it that way is because what we're doing is we're locking in in common terms, you're locking in a place that you don't want to be moving so that you don't hurt yourself. So this is a better way to do a full body core, stabilizing exercise for a less chance of injuring yourself versus all these other crazy, infomercial type things. So we really recommend dead bug.
Dead bug's a good one. And then
Mostly dead bug.
And then when it comes to the lion dancing, same thing we mentioned before with the tail part, there's a lot that goes into it. You have to be taught it. You can't just magically learn it, right? There's a learning curve to it, but there are some ways that you can start preparing for it. If you are someone who does traditional Chinese martial arts, a traditional school will also have lion dancing in it, and if that's something that you aspire to do, then you want to have some of the basics down. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so if you're nice and strong and ready to go, then you're just learning the dance part, right? So if your body's ready, then that gives you one step closer. So definitely keep at it. So that was our heads or tails. Today we did the heads, and last week we did tails. So if you missed that, please check back. It is on our YouTube channel, also on IGTV, on both of our Control Your Health as well as Sifu Mimi Chan. So please keep following us. Let us know if you have any questions or suggestions, and we are still in it. So we're gonna say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
See you next week.